Welcome! I am glad to announce you that my new book, Magical Linguistics, is finally out and published. You can find it down below if you want to check what it is about. It is called The New Language Patterns That Make People Stop and Listen to You. Many important things to say about that. I will make in this video a small recap of all the chapters one by one, and I hope this will allow you to make your decision about whether or not you need this book today. This one is specifically about language patterns. How do you use language to open people's minds, hence the key and the lock on the cover into the mind of somebody, yours and somebody else included. Because you can either open the mind of somebody, you can also lock somebody's mind by the way you use your language, whether you want to use it in a therapeutic way or in some authoritarian way. And without further ado, all the explanations about what is in it chapter by chapter. As I said in the previous video, you may not even need to read it from front to end. You may just choose the chapters that are the most relevant for you at this point and come back to it later. If you don't need to read the entire book right away, you may at the same time just read what you need and come back to it. To explain to you briefly, therefore, what is in it, the introduction is more my epistemological take on why this book, why did I sense some huge urgency in writing something about this topic, because it is mixed with social media manipulation, with how our minds now are controlled in so many more ways than they used to, and we get into verbal conflicts way more than we used to, because now every opinion, political, gender, whatever you want, is polarized. Before studying any of the facts, everything is polarized and people try to destroy each other verbally, sometimes without even understanding what they are really talking about. So the introduction is more my take on this more philosophical, epistemological aspect of the book. Then chapter 1 is getting into the core of linguistics, the real foundation you will need to figure out everything else in the book. It is about belief structures. How do we attach more importance to some beliefs rather than others, and the main rhetorical questions coming from the meta model that can help you unveil any belief in somebody you speak with, somebody who is completely stuck-minded and you can't figure out how to help that person or how to make a compromise if it is a debate. Which questions to ask and why are they so relevant, so that the conversation becomes more productive from the get-go. That way you start on a good foundation with the person you are interacting with. Then chapter 2 is on pattern interrupts and confusion language. I wanted to make that one early in the book because I know it is a very, very hot topic for all of you guys. You have been asking so much about this. I reveal some things in it that I never really revealed to that extent, or that I never really explained in so much detail. So the whole thing about how do you create a shock in the conversation so that the person who may not listen to you so far starts paying attention by now. How do you do that in a non-confrontational way and in a confrontational way where you flirt with rudeness without really falling into it either. Then chapter 3 is about specifically the specific meta model with specific patterns of how do you clarify critical information. And I explain in this one at the beginning of the chapter that pretty much any goal you have not achieved is partly due to the lack of clarity into your thinking. When you start becoming much more clear about where you want to go, why do you want to go there, even if the why is another chapter, where do you want to go, what will that look like, and who will be with you once you get this, everything is going to be easier, smoother, and at the same time this will unveil deeper insecurities and fear, because whenever you specify unclear information, all the blockages and reasons why your life does not move on becomes clear, and that is very uncomfortable for people who never worked on themselves. That's why I rehearse in that chapter, be gentle when you ask those questions to somebody else. It can be very, very difficult to process emotionally what is going to get out, what is going to come out as answers from those patterns. I also explain how does my mind work when I decide where to lead the conversation next. Whenever you say something and the person just doesn't connect with what you say, they don't care about what you say, Okay, how do I decide where to go next based on that blank, based on that confusion, based on that blockage, where the person does not really get interested in what I have to say? How do I decide where to lead the conversation next to bring their mind to a new discovery? That is explained in this chapter. Then chapter 4 is about the original intent, which in this model I mix with anything that belongs to the backstory, either of the person you are interacting with or the facts in history in the past that they are using as evidence to try to prove you wrong or to try to bring some nuance to the conversation. Whenever somebody is using their backstory, what happened in their life, or something that happened in the history of somebody else or in history in general, this is what I feel, what I stick into the original intent pattern. It is about clarifying where does that come from. Why did this start? If there is a problem, what in the past caused this problem, which is obviously in the beginning linked with the cause and effect of any belief, but even prior to the cause and effect of this belief they have right now, what else happened before that, and how to adapt whenever you communicate with somebody who's got a life experience that is too far away from yours, and as a consequence you and that person just don't understand each other because you come from backgrounds too different. Then how to adapt to this. Chapter 5 is slightly more theoretical, at least in the beginning, even if I did my best to simplify everything. It is just a slightly more theoretical thing because I go into transformational grammar, which is one of the foundations of NLP and the meta model, and how the semantics works on a deeper level. I really wanted to remove too technical details. I hope I maintained only what was useful and relevant and dismissed what was too technical and too theoretical. It is just to better explain how language can always represent another reality than the one your interlocutor is talking about or is coming up from in their worldview. How can you always change that? Why the mind is always more malleable than we think it is. There is a great study I give the reference of in that chapter about people getting planted in their head false memories, and it works. Not on everyone, but on many people. You will see that study explained step by step, and giving you some of the best language patterns in here to create a compromise. Whenever you are in a confrontation, how can you bring a compromise on this one in a purely non-confrontational way? In this chapter, nothing confrontational, really purely about hoping to create a connection with the person you are interacting with from a good faith argument. Nothing bad, just how can we work together in this. Chapter 6 on the alternative views is the really most critical hardcore reframing chapter about the most elementary way of creating reframing, which is A is not A, it is B. It is not this, it is that. I did not yell at you, I taught you a lesson. This is not war, this is divergent political interest. She is not hoe, she is simply sexually active. Whenever you turn one term or definition into another one, that is the most basic way we use reframing every day, and you are doing that already in your conversations even without knowing it. But maybe you're not doing it as much as you could. This chapter is about clarifying how our mind works whenever we translate one thing into another thing to fit the narrative we want to believe. So this one goes hand in hand with alternative map on chapter 5. They go together because alternative map is about what do I attribute more virtue to? What do I think is more virtuous, more moral than something else? And then the alternative views is, okay, I have this belief in my head of what is right, what is wrong. Then how do I translate that linguistically into a clear suggestion or statement that can be understood by their mind without opposing too much resistance? And that is very technical. Some language structures work much better than others to that extent. I spent like 2 weeks on that chapter alone to try to find the best, the most elementary linguistic formula that can make you create those patterns on the spot whenever you need them. It was very challenging for me, and I hope this chapter is finally good for everyone who will read it. Chapter 7 is, I would say, one of my favorite ones from the whole book. It is about future outcomes, or in this model, resulting outcome. What will happen as a result of this belief? You want to believe this, you want to believe something positive or negative. What is a future outcome, a future consequence based on that current worldview or that current understanding of how your life works? And this one is much more therapeutic than some other chapters that may be more on the debate techniques. This one is definitely 100% on the therapeutic way of using language, because it is about opening perception of somebody who believes their life is completely fucked up, completely stuck. How can you open their mind again to some more optimistic views of life, but how can you do that in a way that is ecological with their current worldview and current life? When you try to plant something that never belonged there into their mind, that will just create resistance, and even if you were to finally convince them, they will most likely not act upon the change you have induced. However, if you accept their current worldview, accept their perception of the future is right, is true, and you redirect this through some language techniques, some of them are about submodalities and other techniques, then they may have a better opinion, a better version of reality of what will happen to them, instead of only getting worried about what might go wrong in the future, why their life can't change from now, why everything is doomed to stay the way it is. How can they open their mind and move on, even when they have been facing dramatic life circumstances, even when they have been facing trauma? How can they evolve past that? I give some stories of mine, some stories of people I saw. It is really about opening perception into the future. Then chapter 8, as I know, will be the one most people will jump onto in the very beginning. It is a chapter on hypnotic metaphors, on how do you create a compelling story that will lead people's minds away from any conflict or any fear, any trauma, and lead them into a new realization, while opposing zero resistance, because whenever you go into the realm of parallel thinking, of metaphoric thinking, you distance yourself and you distance their mind from any tense, difficult conflict at hand. Either conflict with you or conflict inside their own head about something, for example, they want to do, but they don't allow themselves to do that. How can you create a spontaneous metaphor that will lead their mind away from the present conflict and into considering all the other options available that can be there? I know how much this topic is relevant to any person entering the field of NLP and hypnosis, because it seems like hypnotic metaphors are one of the most difficult concept or technique to grasp for beginners and intermediate hypnotists. So I know this one is very important. I did my best again to provide as many examples as I could for how does my mind work. I really self-modeled myself to figure out how do I create those metaphors on the spot, because I had that skill from the beginning. When I started, I could invent metaphors almost intuitively right away, and I really wanted to break down that skill from my own head. Okay, I can do that without thinking, but how do I not think when I create them? And I give you the whole process of what my mind does into the book. Then chapter 10 is on the metaframe. This is getting this time much more confrontational, when you are in a strong opposition to somebody who is not in any shape or form interested in letting you speak or interested in hearing your opinion. They just want to impose something on you, to bend you to their will. How do you, first of all, spot that? What is the hidden narcissistic mechanism at play behind such behaviors and such maneuvers? And how do you defend against that? I give something from my own life here that I never shared with anyone. So also I removed many details to not make that too simple to understand, but something in that chapter relates to me, and if I was telling you the whole story, it is even way worse than what I wrote in the chapter. And then I also gave a study we had done with my friends when we were in college, and we had tested in the streets how would people respond to us depending on which signs of authority we display on ourselves. And that is again coming back to the perception people have of you, or the perception they have of what you say, which can always be reinterpreted, which can always be manipulated, which can always be changed depending on how you interact with people. So this one is maybe more going all over the board. I know this one is less concrete maybe, or maybe it is, I'm not sure. You will tell me if you like it or not. It is in any case less about therapeutic interventions and much more about confrontations, and not the ones you like. Read the ones where you used to be completely stuck in a conversation. How do you still articulate something important despite the other person trying to get you stuck in a manipulative rhetoric you don't want to fit into. Then chapter 10 is going into the concrete, tangible applications of the model. This time, the first one by going into seduction, seductive language. How do you use hypnotic seduction even in a real conversation with somebody you want to date? Obviously, I wrote that from the perspective of a man trying to seduce a woman because it is where I do have experience. Sorry, I'm not really into the LGBT, at least not myself. I respect them, but I didn't want to try that, at least not right now. So I had to write from the perspective of a man seducing a woman. This chapter would have been much longer because one of the directions I had in mind when I started writing that book was to make it all about seduction, because it is the way I learned NLP myself, and then I jumped to something else. But therefore this chapter would have been much longer. I only kept a few techniques that from experience I know are the ones that will be the most beneficial for you if you are in that phase where you need to figure out how to approach the opposite sex and how can you have a gentle conversation with them without appearing like a pig, even if sometimes that can be interesting too. You will see in the book what I'm talking about. This one could have been much longer, therefore it might even be another book I might be writing later, but I incorporated in this one too many tips about how to develop those skills, not even in seduction, but in general, how do you develop language skills, because this is the field in which I learned that myself. So I could talk from a very concrete experience, from people I saw who studied NLP but never really mastered anything, and people who did. What is the difference? Why does one works? Why did one succeed and not the other? And I give you all of that in details. Then we have the chapter on sales, chapter 11, which was not planned in the beginning, but somebody suggested it, and I thank him because indeed it was a great idea. It allowed me to insert many more discussions about how do you dance around confrontations without falling into it, because a sales or a negotiation situation will imply sometimes implicit confrontations that you need to dance around and remain polite, without which you may not get paid in the end. If it is in a sales context or if it is in a negotiation, usually there is money on the line, so I include a lot of psychology around money and why it is such a heated topic for most people, and how can you dance around those fears, those traumas sometimes. When you talk about money with some people, they will really not like the conversation because it is appealing to too many difficult feelings to process. How can you calm that down and dance around this smoothly and handle any objections that may arise during a sales conversation? Although this is not my biggest topic of mastery, I did sales in the past, and in my business technically I am selling to all of you, so after 4 years I would say yes, I have figured out from the best I could why do people object when they don't like what I sell. Why does that happen, and how can I dance around this so that they don't get triggered and instead they see the value of what I have to sell. And all of those again are about linguistics. How do you present what you have to say? How do you change the meaning of some sentences so that it fits the model of the world of the person you are interacting with? That is an art all in itself, and you can learn the structure of that art to improve faster. And then the last chapter is about political debates, political rhetoric, and even manipulative rhetoric sometimes. We talk about gaslighting into this chapter, which is probably the most difficult form of manipulation to get away from. I preferred to keep that chapter for the end because obviously political debates in the current political climate is a very heated topic, and I know some things that I wrote there might be misinterpreted or might be causing a lot of really defense mechanisms. On purpose, whenever I talk about something positive or negative from the left or the right, I always give the other side of the coin to show that we can see both positive and negative into any political party. It is mostly about how do you present the information, and the goal was not to preach for any political view. I don't care about what your views are. I want to have a conversation with you, no matter what your beliefs are. At least I want to figure out where you come from and how do you come up to those concepts about how the political world works. It is not about preaching there is one ideology that is better than another one. It is about showing how any ideology can be shown as the truth depending on how you structure your arguments, and if you fell into some form of rhetoric that got your mind in prison, how do you get out of this? And how can you discuss with somebody who is trying to make you fit into that kind of logic? You won't change their mind if it is in a confrontation, in that type of political confrontation. You won't change their mind, but at least you can maintain the stance and make sure they don't swallow you either during the argument. Political debates are never about convincing the person in front of you, they are about convincing the audience that is watching. How do you do that? It is much more complicated than only changing one belief. Much more complicated, there is a whole structure. This chapter is the longest of them all. And as I said, I kept it for the end because since I knew those topics, we talk about right-wing, left-wing, climate, economy, all of those topics are very heated. Therefore, I kept that for the end because most people, unfortunately or fortunately, don't go up to the end of a book when they purchase it. Therefore, I have faith in the fact that the only people who will get up to the end actually have enough brain cells to understand there is nuance in what I say. I am not implying anything for granted into my own opinions. Even if in that chapter I don't even give my opinions anyway. I show both sides of any coin in the political spectrum. Even with that, I wanted to keep that for the end because I knew this might be a bit more confrontational for some people who will read that. That being said, at the end you have a conclusion, assembling everything together, and you have this final model giving you the easiest question you can ask for any part of the model to figure out what could you say into that category to make the mind of somebody change or at least see things differently, at least getting to a compromise. How can you get their mind there? And I give in this conclusion too what I think is the fastest way to develop verbal acuity. Whenever you are in a conversation and you don't know what to say next, there is one mental sequence you can use to always know what to say. I haven't talked about this that many times because it is new to me. I discovered that strategy not that long ago. Therefore, even if you have watched all of my videos, chances are you still haven't seen that one, at least not put into use, that strategy for learning. So you will have that in the conclusion. And at the end, I give a few recommended books to give you some further learning if you are interested. With all of that, I hope this book will be relevant for you. I did my best to bring everything you guys have been asking about the most into all the chapters and deleting anything that was maybe more of interest to me, but I knew it was not going to be as interesting to the people reading. So it is really based on you, on what the feedback you gave me over the years and what you guys want to learn about, related to sleight of mouth, related to how hypnotic anchoring works, all of those things. You have all of it inside. It is down below. Obviously, I will recommend to get the physical copy because to me, this is a book you keep by your side and keep checking into it whenever you need to go back into some language structures or some language patterns, anything that you need to put in place into your conversations right now. And let me know, obviously, what you thought of the book if you have already read it. Thanks a lot and see you soon.